when her own torpedo sank America's deadliest submarine after destroying 33 Japanese ships. Is it possible for a vessel so dominant, so lethal, to be brought down by its own hand? October 24th, 1944. The Formosa Strait. The water is a jagged expanse of black glass under a moonless sky. Deep beneath the surface, the USS Tang, a Palau-class submarine and the most feared predator in the Pacific, stalks its final prey. Commanded by the legendary Richard O'Kane, the Tang had spent the last 14 months rewriting the manual on undersea warfare. She had sent tens of thousands of tons of Imperial Japanese shipping to the bottom of the ocean. But on this night, during her fifth and most aggressive war patrol, the Tang would face an enemy she couldn't outmaneuver. It wasn't a Japanese destroyer or a depth charge that would seal her fate. It was a single, malfunctioning piece of American engineering. This is the story of the USS Tang, the 87 men who called her home, and the harrowing final minutes of a crew that found themselves trapped 180 feet below the waves, fighting a battle that no one was expected to survive. To understand the tragedy of the Tang, one must understand the man at her helm. Commander Richard "Dick" O'Kane was not just a submariner, he was a tactician of cold, calculated aggression. Having served as the executive officer under the famous Mush Morton on the USS Wahoo, O'Kane had learned the down-the-throat shot and the art of the surface night attack. When he took command of the Tang, SS-306, in late 1943, he turned her into a precision instrument of destruction. The Tang was a marvel of the era, a Palau-class fleet submarine. She stretched over 311 feet long, powered by 4 massive Fairbanks-Morse diesel engines. She was armed with 10 21-inch torpedo tubes, 6 in the bow, 4 in the stern, and carried the Mark 18 electric torpedo, a weapon designed to leave no wake, giving the enemy no warning of their impending doom. By her 5th patrol in October 1944, the Tang was already a legend. In just 4 previous outings, she had sunk more ships than almost any other boat in the fleet. The crew was a tight-knit brotherhood of silent service professionals, men like Clayton Decker, a young motor machinist's mate, and Lieutenant Bill Leibold, the boat's navigator. They operated in a world of recycled air, the smell of diesel fuel, and the constant low-frequency hum of electric motors. The strategic situation in October 1944 was reaching a fever pitch. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history, was looming. The Tang was assigned to the Formosa Strait to intercept Japanese reinforcements attempting to bolster their defenses in the Philippines. On the night of October 23rd, Commander O'Kane spotted a massive convoy. This wasn't just a few freighters, it was a sprawling forest of masts, consisting of tankers, transports, and heavily armed escorts. O'Kane didn't dive. He stayed on the surface, utilizing the Tang's low profile and high surface speed to weave through the enemy formation like a ghost. In a series of breathtaking maneuvers, the Tang fired spread after spread. Within hours, the convoy was a graveyard of burning oil and sinking steel. O'Kane had exhausted almost his entire complement of torpedoes. By the early hours of October 25th, only 2 Mark 18s remained in the tubes. The Tang had already destroyed more ships on this single patrol than many submarines did in a year. But O'Kane, ever the hunter, spotted one last target on the horizon, a trickery but still dangerous transport ship. He decided to use his final 2 fish to finish the job. 0200 hours, October 25th, 1944. The air on the bridge was damp and salty. Commander O'Kane stood on the cigarette deck, binoculars pressed to his eyes. Just 1,000 yards away, the darkened silhouette of the Japanese transport sat low in the water. "Set depth 10 feet, O'Kane ordered. The tension in the conning tower was palpable. The crew was exhausted but exhilarated. They were one shot away from heading home to Pearl Harbor with a record-breaking haul. In the forward torpedo room, the men loaded the final Mark 18 electric torpedo into tube number 2. Unlike the older steam-powered Mark 14s, the Mark 18 was silent and invisible. It used lead-acid batteries to power its motor, leaving no telltale trail of bubbles. But the Mark 18 had a dark reputation for circular runs, a mechanical failure where the rudder jams, sending the torpedo into a lethal 360-degree turn. "Fire 23!" O'Kane shouted. The boat shuddered as the second-to-last torpedo left the tube. It ran true, striking the transport and sending a pillar of white water and debris into the air. One torpedo left. Tube number 4. "Fire 24!" At 02:30 hours, the final torpedo of the Tang's legendary career hissed into the sea. O'Kane and the bridge crew watched the dark water, waiting for the impact. But something was wrong. "Sir, it's broaching!" shouted the lookout. Instead of disappearing under the waves, the torpedo breached the surface, its nose porpoising out of the water. Then, to the horror of every man on the bridge, the weapon began to curve. It wasn't heading for the Japanese transport. It was banking hard to the left. "Left full rudder! All ahead flank!" O'Kane screamed into the voice tube. He realized with sickening clarity what was happening. The torpedo was in a circular run. The very weapon they had birthed into the ocean was now coming back to kill its mother. The Tang's diesel engines roared to life, the exhaust coughing thick black smoke as she tried to claw her way out of the circle of death. The torpedo was coming at them from the port quarter. It was moving at 27 knots. The Tang could only manage 20. For 20 agonizing seconds, the man on the bridge watched the phosphorescent glow of the torpedo's mechanical brain as it corrected its course, locked onto the massive hull of the submarine. "It's going to hit," someone whispered. Little did they know, the next few seconds would end the lives of most men on board and begin a nightmare for the survivors that would last until the end of the war. At 02:30 and 20 seconds, the Mark 18 torpedo struck the Tang near the aft torpedo room. The explosion was catastrophic. The blast didn't just hold a ship, it whipped the 300-foot submarine like a piece of tin. The stern was instantly pulverized. Men in the after-engine room were killed before they could even register the sound. On the bridge, the force of the explosion threw O'Kane and 8 others into the freezing water. The Tang didn't just sink, she plummeted. Her stern, filled with thousands of tons of rushing seawater, dragged the bow upward at a 40-degree angle. Inside the boat, it was a vision of hell. Lights shattered, plunging the compartments into absolute darkness, save for the blue-green electrical fires arcing across the control panels. The screams of the injured were drowned out by the roar of high-pressure air lines snapping and the terrifying groan of the hull as it was forced down past its test depth. Clayton Decker in the forward battery room was thrown against a bulkhead. He felt the ship lurch and pitch violently. "We're going down!" someone yelled through the dark. The Tang hit the ocean floor with a bone-jarring thud. Depth, 180 feet. The survivors, roughly 30 men out of the original 87, huddled in the forward torpedo room, the only compartment that wasn't yet completely flooded. But their sanctuary was a ticking clock. The pressure outside was nearly 80 pounds per square inch. Water was spraying through the rivets and packing glands with the force of a fire hose. Even worse, the electrical fires had reached the main batteries. The mixture of seawater and battery acid began producing chlorine gas, a greenish, choking vapor that burns the lungs and eyes. "Get the Momsen lungs," the senior officer ordered. The Momsen lung was a primitive rebreather, a rubber bag filled with soda lime to scrub carbon dioxide. No one had ever successfully used it to escape a submarine at this depth in combat conditions. The men began to don the gear in the dark, their hands shaking, breathing through the rubber mouthpieces as the chlorine gas thickened. Outside, in the pitch-black water of the Formosa Strait, Richard O'Kane and the few men blown off the bridge were treading water, Surrounded by the burning wreckage of the Japanese ships they had just destroyed, they could hear the Japanese escorts approaching, dropping depth charges on the ghost of the Tang. Inside the forward torpedo room, the heat was becoming unbearable. The pressure was so high that men's eardrums were popping. They had to equalize the pressure inside the room with the ocean outside before they could open the escape trunk. This meant intentionally flooding their own compartment. They stood in water up to their chests, then their necks. Clayton Decker remembered the terrifying calm that settled over the men. There was no panic, only the grim mechanical necessity of survival. One by one, they entered the small escape trunk. They had to duck under the skirt, a metal cylinder that trapped a pocket of air, and then swim up into the dark void of the ocean. The first group went up. Only a few reached the surface. The rest were claimed by the pressure or the Japanese patrol boats waiting above. When it was Decker's turn, he took a final breath of the tainted air and pushed off. As he ascended, he had to remember the most important rule of submarine escape: exhale. If a man held his breath, the expanding air in his lungs would literally explode them as the pressure decreased. Ho, 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 he chanted to himself, forcing the air out in rhythmic bursts. As he broke the surface, he wasn't met with a rescue party. He was met with the smell of oil and the sound of Japanese machine gun fire. The Japanese were circling the area in small boats, picking up their own survivors and shooting at anything American. Of the 30 men who made it to the forward torpedo room, only 13 managed to exit the submarine. Of those 13, only 5 survived the ascent and the hours spent treading water. In total, 9 men from the Tang were left alive, 9 out of 87. Among them were Commander O'Kane, Navigator Bill Leibold, and Clayton Decker. They were picked up by a Japanese frigate, but for these men, the nightmare was only beginning. The Japanese sailors, furious over the loss of their comrades and the devastating damage the Tang had inflicted, beat the survivors with clubs and rifle butts as they were hauled onto the deck. Against impossible odds, they had escaped the sunken tomb at the bottom of the sea, only to become prisoners of a desperate and vengeful enemy. The survivors of the Tang spent the remainder of the war in special information camps, like the infamous Omori. They were subjected to interrogation, starvation, and brutal treatment. They were kept hidden from the Red Cross. The U.S. Navy officially listed the Tang as lost with all hands. It wasn't until the Japanese surrender in August 1945 that the world learned the truth about the Tang. When the final tally was calculated, the statistics were staggering. In just 5 patrols, the USS Tang had officially sunk 24 Japanese ships, totaling 93,824 tons. However, later research and Japanese records suggested the number was even higher, 33 ships. This made Richard O'Kane the most successful submarine commander in American history. For his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity during the Tang's final engagement, Commander Richard O'Kane was awarded the Medal of Honor. He was only one of 7 submariners to receive the nation's highest award during World War II. The Tang herself was awarded 2 Presidential Unit citations, but the cost was steep. 78 brave men remain on eternal patrol in the Formosa Strait. They lie within the rusted hull of the Tang, a monument to the ferocity of the Pacific Submarine War. The loss of the Tang led to immediate investigations into the Mark 18 torpedo. It was discovered that the circular run was a more common defect than previously thought, leading to urgent redesigns of the guidance systems to ensure no other crew would ever be hunted by their own weapons. The story of the Tang remains a cornerstone of submarine lore, a tale of unparalleled lethality, a freak mechanical betrayal, and the indomitable will of men who refuse to die in the dark. The ocean is a vast, unforgiving graveyard, and the Formosa Strait holds the secrets of the Tang closely.
Today, the wreck is a protected war grave, a silent reminder of the thin line between victory and catastrophe. Richard O'Kane lived to the age of 83, passing away in 1994. Until his final days, he spoke of his crew not as victims of a faulty torpedo, but as the finest sailors he had ever known. They were men who went into the deep knowing the risks, and who, even in their final moments, looked out for one another. The USS Tang was a hunter without equal, a ship that defined an era of naval warfare. Its end was tragic, its loss was profound, but its legacy is immortal.